All right. How's everybody enjoying day 2? Huzzah is always the right answer. Good job. All right, so I am Amy White. I am the editor-in-chief over at GamesKinney.com, and I'll be our moderator today for Next Generation MMO Games. What is next for multiplayer trends? We have a really exciting panel of speakers today. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Want to start?
Sure. My name is Stephan Frost. I'm the design producer at Carbine Studios and the voice of DevSpeak, if you've seen any of those.
My name's Ian Fisher, design director at Robot Entertainment.
I'm Dave Georgeson. I'm the director of development for the EverQuest franchise at Sony Online.
Hi, I'm Kjartan Emilsson. I'm a physicist turned designer. I was lead game designer of EVE when it launched, but currently I'm working. I have the strange title of EVE Universe Architect, and I'm working on the overarching EVE Universe concepts of EVE.
My name is Stephan Johnston. I'm the president of Launch Media Network. We make Guild Launch and GamesKinney and some other things for online gamers and everything.
All right, so you've just told us who you are and what you do, but I think this is the wrong PowerPoint. Nope, okay, we just had a rogue slide, sorry. So why do you love your job? Just give us like a couple quick.
There's so many things I love about my job. I get to work with all of the design teams on a regular basis, and we get to kind of interact with the community and fans and kind of see where we're going with WildStar specifically. It's great because I just get to work with creative people on a daily basis, and we've got a really great reaction so far from everybody, so it's just been a ton of fun.
I don't really have much of a choice as to whether I love it or not, because it's the only thing that I've ever been good at in any way, so I better love it. I like to work with talented people too, and it's a kind of industry where you're definitely going to be working with talented people. I've had a lot of pretty crappy jobs in my life. So one of the things that's nice about it is everybody I work with every day wants to be there 1,000%, right? So it's nice to go into that kind of team every day.
Shorter answer, I just like making fun and getting paid for it. Yeah, I mean, we work with great people. Everybody does in this industry. It's just fantastic. But, ultimately it's about whether or not you guys are having fun.
Yeah, I second this, working with people, and especially the multidisciplinary aspect of game making is really fascinating, and lots of fun working in that kind of environment, very creative environment, but also immensely valuable is creating something that people care so much about and get so emotionally attached to, and it's kind of humbling to see that happening.
We build products that support pretty much every game that comes out in some capacity, either through editorial or on the Guild Launch side, building community for all the MMOs, and we support 600 games at this point. So the perspective for me is really the best part, seeing the entire industry grow and interacting with all the different parts of it.
All right, so what do you see as the strongest evolutionary force in MMOs right now, and what impact will it have on the industry over the next 2 years? Anybody want to go first?
Well, I just thought I was going to go in order.
Go for it, yeah.
How about it?
You look bright-eyed. I think you have a good answer. Go for it.
So a big part of, and this will kind of play into the future of this as well, we have a lot of games, and we were talking about this earlier actually. MMOs really are a bunch of games that you have to make sort of into one, and they have to have interlocking systems in order for you to kind of care about them, right? So I kind of foresee, and you can even see this a little bit on the EQ Next stuff, like that's a part of a game that's also part of another game. I kind of foresee MMOs moving towards that, where you see parts like 5-man content and things like that, where you're going to kind of focus on that. And you can kind of relate those to other things as you update your game and genre and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I see it going.
It's probably not the sexiest of all answers, but if I had to pick the one thing that I think is the strongest evolutionary force in these games today, I'd say it's finance. It used to be, not too long ago, that the only way you were going to get an MMO made, there were probably 2 or 3 companies in the world that had enough money to put it together and had teams big enough to do it. Technology, things like Kickstarter, the ability for people to be able to put together games that they really want to make with potentially put together games with a much smaller team for a much smaller investment. I think you're going to see a lot of MMO style games that don't fit the old mold, that aren't maybe as big as the games we've been playing for the last decade. They're going to specialize and serve a small niche community, and that's going to be great.
Well, you can tell from the projects that we're working on that basically we think you guys are the most evolutionary force in gaming. We're user-generated content and building these games together and creating worlds together that you guys want to live in for long periods of time seems like the right thing to do, and that's what we're doing with Landmark and EverQuest Next. So hopefully that works out. So far, so good.
No pressure.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, CCP and Eve, we actually came from a background of virtual reality, really, and around 1995, I guess. It's a pretty long time ago. And our aim was always to build worlds where you live in and do things in. And the doing part is really the game part, but there's also the other part of actually living there and interacting with other people and sharing stuff. And this is something that we've maybe consciously and sometimes subconsciously always been working towards. And Eve has, of course, become this huge single-shot world where we are sort of achieving that in a certain way. But now we're trying to add more stuff in it, like other ways to do other games to play in this world. And this is kind of the Eve universe kind of aspect to it. And of course, the emergence of affordable VR technology now makes that whole thing much more interesting. So we just want to continue with that vision because we believe it's a very good long-term vision.
So this will sound, not that exciting, but I think really server-sizing is really the evolutionary force because it's what lets all of you without any barriers interact, and then all the other 50,000 people that are here, and then all of their friends, and then the 135 million people that play MMOs, if they want to play a game, interact with each other. And CCP's done this for years. They pioneered a lot of that, but we're seeing more and more of it. It's what lets marketplaces, user-generated content, and things like that pop up without artificial barriers. And when you talk about the player communities and how they evolve, it's what will enable them going forward. So.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right. So someone mentioned finance as one of the evolutionary forces. What do you consider the most effective business model for a new game launching today, and why? And do you think we'll actually see any brand new business models for MMO emerging in the next 5 years?
So yeah, this is always a fun question to answer. And of course, you asked the subscription-based one first, right?
It's no different on my side.
Yeah, different things work for different people. I mean, you can ask gentlemen from Eve Online right now, right, if that's working well for them. I think it is. The free-to-play stuff has worked out really well for stuff like League of Legends. I think it's all about how you have to look at how you monetize your game and what kind of game you're making. And I think a lot of developers have to look at what type of gameplay you're making and how the economic model can relate to that gameplay so that you are playing something that is fun and is also fair. Like you feel like, well, I'm paying for this, but I feel like it's okay because this is a good service. So I think it's different. I don't think there's one. It's like, oh, free to play, obviously. I think it kind of ranges.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think this question is kind of like, what's the best car to drive? It really depends on the kind of game you're trying to put together. If you want to go free to play, you're definitely going to be able to get a lot more people in the door to have a look at your game. Some people argue you have less investment, so you're going to turn people through there much faster. Depends on what kind of market you're trying to hit, what location you're launching in, what kind of game you're doing. I think there can be a subscription-based game, there can be one-cost games, there can be free-to-play games. It depends on what you're building.
Yeah, obviously the answer is different strokes for different folks. That's absolutely the answer. But I personally like free-to-play a lot because, it puts a lot of burden on us to make sure that the game is really, really high quality and very, very entertaining. Because if it's not, we don't make anything. We don't make a single dime. So I particularly like that perspective. I like to be proud of what we're working on and showing it off to as many folks as possible so that we can get really large communities. And so from our point of view, we really like that model. But there's no way that we would say that that's the only model for people. That's ridiculous.
Lose it the way around too. You lose money if you, it's not just not getting money, it's losing money if they don't like it.
Well, that's true, but I guess you just have to have a certain amount of ego to pursue this line of thinking. And if you think your ideas are good enough, it's a great model. But, it's different strokes.
Well, yeah, at CCP we're already running Evolutionary with a hybrid business model because Eve is subscription-based and Dust is free-to-play. So I think that the business model that you might see, especially if you see games evolving towards being this kind of conglomeration of multiple waves of playing, they need to fit the gameplay. And a free-to-play game is very much driven by volume. You need to push a lot of people through that. And it is very suitable for fast gameplay and such player profiles. But for example, Eve is more of a slow burner in terms of having strategies that last for months. And for that kind of gameplay, subscription is pretty suitable for that. So, and it has been very successful for us. So we certainly would be looking at both of things together.
I mean, obviously the most effective business model is the one that funds the game, keeps it interesting, lets the company keep creating cool content for you all. But I think one of the things that we're seeing more of is really the sort of pre-launch phase of, Kickstarter style funding, that's letting new things come around, or the idea that you can release a game, charge a little bit for it when it's in beta or alpha, and have people that excited about it, not just responding on forums and saying, yeah, we like it, but actually interacting with the game early.
Well, the other interesting thing to point out on the Kickstarter end of things is MMOs are huge, expensive things to make. Like, they're the riskiest, scariest things to make. And I think you're totally right to say that funding an MMO on our scale, for example, for Wildstars, it's a huge game. And it takes a lot of money and time and failure and kind of iterating and working with you guys to make sure stuff is good. Kickstarter, the problem with Kickstarter is you get your amount and that's it. So you better make it, right? So an MMO that comes out, you're like, oh, this kind of sucks. Sorry. You then have to give it to everybody, right? Hopefully you make enough. I mean, there's games like, Star Citizen, or what was the other one with the space stuff where you get the ships and you get to pre-order those. I can't think of the game name right now. Yeah. Right. Awesome, right? Yeah, so there's...
Was that Chris Roberts?
Yeah. So there's instances like that, right, where you're going to get 42 million. I hope you can use that 42 million well. You probably can. It's a lot of money. But if you are coming out with a game and you get like, hey, we got $100,000 to make an MMO, good luck, I hope that you guys, when you gave that money, you're like, see ya, money, But,
The worst part about that too is a lot of the people that give you the money think $100,000 is a lot of money to an individual. So you have 100,000 people that each give you $1, and they're like, come on, we give you $100,000. You're not going to get the game done.
But I mean, so look at Landmark though. You all are selling founders packs. I imagine you're selling them at a pretty good rate. That's essentially a pre-funding or a pre-launch funding method, right?
Well, I'll put that myth to bed. It doesn't even come close to our development cost.
But it's getting people to engage financially, not just in a light engagement manner.
Well, I'll tell you the reason why we sold the Founders Packs is essentially it's a gate. So that basically the people that get in to alpha and to closed beta are the people that are super interested in helping us make something that's better.
Yep.
The people that have a trollish nature don't necessarily want to pay $100 to get into a game. But on the other hand, the day is coming when we go completely free to play. So as we lower the price and make it easier for people to get in, and we have like free beta keys and everything like that. Now we're getting more and more of a mix into the group. But we started with that alpha group. They're working so closely together with us on almost like a hugely extended dev team that when we started adding more people, the community just just stayed more and more and more solid. Like if we were going to talk about a business model that for the future, what we're pioneering right now, what we're trying to do with this kind of modular approach to rolling out elements and keeping the whole thing entertaining all the way through development and working with our players, if we're successful, still an if at this point, if we're successful, that's something that could be easily emulated by a lot of other companies. So it's the kind of model that could succeed as long as we don't screw it up the first time.
All right, so player-created content has existed in various forms for a long time, but are we seeing a renaissance? Some ways you can kind of interpret this question. How has the player-created content affected the MMO genre? What kinds of player-created content do you think we'll see evolve over the next 5 years? And how do games maintain a balance between that single-player experience versus a community experience, especially when they're creating things and engaging in an exchange?
So Renaissance to me is a big word because that was like the Dark Ages were before that, and there's a bunch of shit, you know, like.
I'm sorry, I really like big words.
Yeah, I know.
might have
I
just-
mean, I get what you're trying to say. I'm just saying that's kind of offensive. Thank you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I will say this. I know. Like what? Where's my? So. The thing to me that is interesting about user-generated content, you know, we have housing in WildStar. The way that we kind of handled that was we put it in its own instance, but anybody can go to it and see it. So it's not really affecting other people per se, but there are things on your housing plot that people can visit and get benefits from. So we're trying to encourage that gameplay, and we have stuff like somebody made a hoverboard skate park on the roof of one of their houses that we did. Sweet. Freaking awesome, out of tables, right? So. Cool, you know, but that doesn't really affect like the outside world per se because that has, you know, issues potentially. So the way that we did that was we kind of just sectioned it off but allowed people to go to it so it can still remain social and that sort of thing. So
If you've heard me speak before, there's a pretty good chance that it was at a talk about emergence or simulation, and I'm a huge believer in it, and I have a lot of respect for people that make kind of linear content games or traditional content games. I think that player-built content is the future, essentially, of gaming, personally. For my taste, I think it's just much more interesting content, and I think that's why I prefer it and why I think kind of computers were built to do simulation, and that's why I think it's going to work out. I played hundreds of hours of kind of traditional MMOs. Every now and then I can kind of remember something some character did or what his name was. I can have stories. I've played Eve for years. I can tell you all kinds of stories about Eve. I remember all of them because I was engaged in them. I caused those things to happen. My corp caused that stuff to happen. Whether we were fighting for something, it was about us. We made that content. I think we're going to see an awful lot more of that in the future. It seems to be interesting for a lot of people, and if you take a look at what's been going on Steam, for example, like some of the games that come out that are just built around this. So if you look at the phenomenon of something like DayZ, Minecraft for sure, I think we see this all over the place, and it's only getting stronger. And we're finally past the point where graphics, like we've been chasing Hollywood and we've been chasing graphics for years and years and years, and we're finally at the point where it costs $1 zillion to get your graphics just a little tiny bit better. So people are going to start to look at things more on the simulation side, and we're going to start to put work into AI on games more than we have in the past, and you're going to start to see different kinds of gameplay evolve from that.
I mean, obviously, we're whole hog into UGC on Landmark. Landmark is basically every single tool that we're using and making to create EverQuest Next. We're giving all of that power and all of that capability to the players in Landmark. And then we're giving them all these persistent worlds where they can do anything. So that's not just building stuff, which is what you can do right now, but it's also AI, PvP, all the different mechanisms for laying out dungeons and story arcs, all of that stuff. So yeah, absolutely, we think that's the future. We're betting our whole bankroll on it. And so far, it's been phenomenal. If you haven't checked out the closed beta for Landmark, then go visit a Twitch stream and earn a key, or come see me after the panel. But you gotta check it out, because the community and what they're doing is just, it's amazing. Like, no joke at all. And what they're gonna do with all these other tools in the future is going to be astounding. So this is the future of gaming, in my opinion. And working together with all of you, well, it's creating a new platform. It's creating something that you guys are designing, and it's very, very engaging.
Yeah, I sometimes find the term player-created content for other players, a little bit or offensive in a certain way. It's nearly like saying like my family and my children is content for me in a way. And because
Is there a better term we can use next time?
I mean, like, we tend to look at the content, for example, in EVE to be very much a social content, which is the way that people play. And me being a physicist, I sometimes look at this world as a chemical reaction that is self-sustained. And somehow we manage to create an environment that can maintain this reaction going on forever. And the thing with such reactions, though, they need to feed on energy, or otherwise they will die out. Like, you know, if you have a spark in a forest, the forest will burn, and then the fire dies off because there are no more trees. You have to wait for the trees to come back. That's content in this case. But I think what I would prefer is when you look at the reaction, the energy in the reaction being the emotions of the players. That's what is going to keep them coming back. It's emotions like revenge and care for other people, and this is a sort of social dynamics that can last for months and a year and keep this whole thing interesting and living. And for me, that's really the thing that we need to try to achieve in that. And of course, creating stuff is part of that, but I think it's really the emotions that need to be the basic energy that feeds into this.
You guys covered a lot of what I was going to say. I'm sitting here at the end.
It's the burden of being at,
I mean,
at that end.
I think when we talk about player-generated content, I mean, I've got a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old who both understand getting in Landmark or getting in Minecraft, building something, and then streaming it. And want to do that. Like, granted, they're my kids, so there's maybe a little bit, they're headed, you know, not the average kids, but they sort of came up with that on their own. Like, they just observed and said, it would be cool to build something and then show people it. And they know it at birth, you know? And so as the tools evolve to do all of that, it's just really cool.
All right, so this is an interesting one. How are MOBAs changing the landscape for MMOs? Are you finding players are wanting different things, or they have outlets for different types of gameplay, and is that changing what the audience wants from the game? Or is it actually generating more demand for competitive play?
So it's just another kind of section that is sort of related to MMOs, right? If you look at WildStar's combat, I would argue that it is kind of MOBA-ish. There's a lot of skill shot-based stuff that you have to do. It's not just the tab target, hit the guy, you know, win. It's actually having those skill shots where you have to line stuff up and be part of that. So I think MOBAs have kind of influenced combat a bit. And you've seen in other games too. There's Neverwinter had it. You know, it's very similar to that. Terra, things like that. And I think that was influenced by that sort of thing.
All games kind of feed into other games, so you'll have things that from MOBA that are going to get into MMO too, but they are a little divorced from one another. I would say that if there's something that you're going to take out of MOBA into the MMO space, it's probably that the MOBAs have proven that it's okay to be deep and complex and hard to get into in a game for. I mean, imagine in 2008 going to a bunch of venture capitalists and pitching a game and saying, I have this idea for a game. It's so freaking complex that no one can ever get into it. You're going to sit down to play, you're going to start playing, people are going to call you names and tell you to go away. You're going to have to go online and look at videos to figure out, you're going to have to spend hundreds of hours before you even know how to play competently, and people are still going to call you names and tell you to go away. Would you like to give us cash? Do you think that's going to be the next greatest game? All right. So I think what we've learned by seeing where this kind of goes is there is a market out there for, we've spent so many years trying to cater to like the kind of, not to be offensive, but we called it lowest common denominator kind of gameplay when we're putting things together. We'd have a really good game and then we're trying to figure out like, how do you get your mom to play this game? Well, my mom doesn't want to play Age of Empires. It doesn't matter how easy I make that game, she's still not going to play it. I can put 300 hours of tutorial in there, and I can call it Mom's Age of Empires, and she's still not going to buy it. So why do we spend our time trying to figure out how to make that game for an audience that really just doesn't want to play it?
I think the terminology was filthy casuals, right?
Did you just call my mom a filthy casual? That wasn't very nice.
If you want to make games for casuals, they're not filthy casuals, but if you have an audience you like and a kind of gameplay that suits them, make gameplay for them. And I think if you look at League, that, you know, or any of the MOBAs really, here's a group of people that were willing to, like, hey, we'll figure out how to get people in, we'll figure out how to do tutorials and teach them later. And really, like, you saw how the community kind of, I mean, if it wasn't for the community, how would you play League of Legends, right? Like, how would you have learned how to play League in the first place if you got in there early? Or hell, games like even Minecraft nowadays with the 100 trillion mods that are out there, if you don't go look at any of that stuff online, you're not going to understand it. Or, for the love of God, Dwarf Fortress. I mean, if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't have any of those audiences. So I think you can take from MOBA that it's okay to have that level of complexity into those games, or at least to try to go after a more niche audience and not try to make a game that is something for everyone. Probably also the other thing you get out of MOBAs is you get proof of concept for some of the business models, particularly in League of Legends style thing and what Valve's doing with Dota 2. That allows some people to have some kind of confidence that there's a business model other than the one or two that they think are the proven models.
Yeah, not a lot of lessons currently that we're applying, but in general, one of the things that MOBAs have done for the industry as a whole is kind of leveled up people's expectations on pace and skill level and stuff in games. So a lot of people that, due to the popularity of these games and the huge numbers of people that are playing it, it's a little bit like WoW was. It drug a whole new cadre of people in to experience a different kind of gameplay. And so LOL and Dota and all those other ones are doing those kinds of things for the gamers in general. And so that opens up possibilities for MMOs that really weren't there until very recently. And so, yeah, I mostly agree with Stephan and Stephen.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really like about MOBAs and esports in general is the fact that in a way it's kind of like an externalized single-shot game where you manage to use fame as a strong emotion, where you can become famous globally. And that becomes like a huge achievement to reach for. But at the same time, it's like an unstable equilibrium. Like you will always topple because somebody is going to get better than you. So in a way, coming back to this self-sustained chemical reaction, I think a MOBA has that to a certain point. You have always like an urge with people to take down or be at the top position, and not within a single game, but globally. And as such, I think that is one of the beautiful thing about that kind of genre. And I think it can very well like live in other games. So you know, in EVE, for example, we have tournaments which have reached the point of being like broadcast and or televised to Twitch and stuff like that, where a lot of people are monitoring them. So you could very well think of these kind of stuff like also happening within an MMO as kind of an activity that you do within an MMO to watch, like you go to sports events and stuff like that.
So I'm hoping the MOBAs show that, you know, in an MMO there's a place for some more complex competitive gaming that isn't quite just, you know, rock, paper, scissors. But also that the MOBAs, you know, evolve into more community, you know, rather than what we were describing, you suck, get out of here, you haven't played this game for 600 hours. I mean, we know there's some parts of that community that are sort of toxic, but one of the things that MMOs create is a lot more downtime where people learn about one another. And that downtime may not be quite as frantic fun, but it's where you build relationships. And so I think there's going to sort of be some interplay between the two as they evolve.
All right, so what do you personally see as the biggest challenge that's facing the MMO gaming genre in the next 5 years?
So you said it earlier, funding. I mean, these things are multi-million, like $100 million games that you have to make. And so they're also risky. And so when you come to somebody, a venture capital group, and you're like, hey, this is going to take 6 to 8 years. Hopefully it's good. And hopefully people will pay us money regularly so that it's enjoyable. That's a really hard pitch. So the way that I think things should go, and I kind of said this earlier, is within these different subgroups of the games, whether it's dungeons or whether it's trade skills or housing or whatever it is, I think we need to make games that are just for those people, and then start adding other sections onto the game. So it's not like, here's all the things at once. It should be, here's one of the things, a year later we have another thing, so on and so forth. So you can kind of start building that out. But funding is definitely the biggest challenge. Because, I mean, aside from EQ coming out, like, what's the next AAA MMO?
Crickets.
Yeah. Thank you, dude. Who did that sound effect? That was perfect.
We have a Foley artist in, in the audience.
Well done. So, I mean, that's the thing that is the scariest to me is if these games don't sell well, they're going to start dying out. So, funding to me is the key scary factor there.
Yeah, funding's difficult for anything. So funding will definitely continue to be an issue. I would say also it's the problem that pretty much every type of gaming is having now. There's more games out there, so getting noticed is going to continue to be an issue, and to, so to speak, keep the reaction going is going to be an issue, because you're going to have a lot of games with a low barrier to entry, so people are going to feel like they can jump around a lot, and they're going to go find things that they're more interested in. So the challenge will be to make a good game and to keep it a good game and to keep people interested and entertained and wanting to come back.
Yeah, I mean, rather than just say exactly the same thing, even though I think that's the number one answer, is basically also keeping your players entertained for long periods of time. MMOs face a particularly unusual challenge in that we are building games for 10 and 20 years of lifespan. EverQuest 1, the original, just hit its 15th birthday a couple of months ago. And that's a really long time for a community to hang with a game. And you have to figure out ways to keep it ever evolving and ever changing and ever entertaining. And that is, it's an ambitious thing. And nowadays, since there are so many more games out there than there used to be, that means you've got to have something really special if you want to keep people's attention.
Yeah, for me, I think it's, I've been going a little bit through like a introspection about this because, like I said, I was coming from the virtual reality kind of approach like many years ago, and at the same time as the internet was basically happening, and so that is something that drives my vision and others from the similar time. And then I look at my kids and I think that I can understand them, that I can empathize with how they are interacting with technology and stuff. But then you realize that these kids are actually born in a virtual reality and have been living there for a long time, even though it's not like a 3D immersive one. It's certainly a virtual reality that they're using on an everyday basis. And trying to understand how that generation of players think and how they use all the different ways of communicating and devices and a shorter attention span, etc. How do you create an experience that can translate to that reality? How do you spread? Do you need to spread the game across, the various means that they're using to communicate? And also, like if you're using new technology like VR headsets, how do you adapt to that? I mean, like walking around in an avatar is not perfectly adapted to that kind of technology. So do you need to find new ways of giving players agency in these kind of worlds? So I think there's a lot of things to look at there, and also need probably a new generation of people that have been like living in this world for a while.
So I think the thing I would add is that the world building is always an expansive process, and MMOs are building worlds, and so there's sort of limitless possibility of what you can add to a game. And as other genres come out and affect MMOs, the possibilities of adding those things are always presenting themselves to if you're doing something new. So unlike some of the other genres where you can't sort of bolt on these other things, you can in a world. Like you can have pockets of it that are all these other genres. So I think one of the big challenges is picking from that buffet as we go forward, because it's a world. It's not just a slice.
Thank you. Just a heads up, in about 5 minutes we're going to open it for audience questions, so if you have questions or you'd like to think about one, now's the time. And also we're going to be giving away 2 Elgato HD game captures at the end, so hang out, listen to your fellow players' questions, and we'll be giving away goodies at the end. All right. So, what do you imagine as the future for MMOs? You know, when we log into an MMO in 2025, what will that game be like? It's okay to go a little crazy. We won't hold you to this. I'm not going to call you in 2025 and...
I hope not. It'd be a little awkward. I'm like, what? Who are, what?
No, we met back at PAX 2014.
So this is a really difficult question, but I think the VR stuff is really intriguing to see where that kind of goes, and when that technology gets better and better, where that's going to take us. I've also noticed that there are other genres of games that are taking a lot of MMO things and kind of putting them in their games, just like The Division or what's the Bungie one that's coming out? Destiny, right? There's a lot of MMO things that are making it into other games, so I think that we're going to start to see these MUT genres of things that kind of blend together, and the VR stuff is super intriguing, so we'll see. Hopefully that kind of evolves. And that treadmill thing, have you guys seen that? You like walk on with it? Yeah.
One on over.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, so I mean, we'll see where it goes. Who knows?
I'll give the fairly boring answer. I don't think it's going to be all that different from what, in terms of like just the general quality of the experience. I mean, I logged into games 10 years ago that I would say are pretty much the games that I'm logging into today in a lot of ways. Things have changed, obviously, but it's not like I'm not on the holodeck today when I was my 80, 88, 10 years ago. So certainly I think the content of games is going to change. I think you're going to have, like, as I've said here a couple times, I think simulation is going to be really big. So I think you're going to have games that are probably have, I think the actual content, if not the presentation and the way that you access the game being similar, I think the content of the games will be very different by that period of time. I think you'll have a lot more kind of undefined sandbox games where the players are the things that are, the activity the players are having in the world has most of the impact on what the game's state is and why you want to be there and have fun there.
I'm totally the opposite. I'm a dreamer. I have purchased every single Kickstarter that has any sort of tech in it that might be VR or AR. I believe that in the future we'll be wearing Myo armbands, space goggles, and walking through and seeing augmented reality everywhere we go and playing MMOs that way. I think that, 25 years is a hell of a long time when you're talking about tech. If you look backwards and you see the kind of pace that it's been accelerating and you see all the stuff that people are working on all the time, I think that that's just going to extend farther and farther out. The days of sitting in your office or in your bedroom and playing on a computer are going to go away because the tech is going to change. It's not that you're going to stop playing PC games. You're just going to play them everywhere. Does that make sense? That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I think that, I agree with the previous speaker before that when you look at the games, if you look back 10 years, I don't think things have changed that much. And so if you extrapolate from there, obviously the VR technology and all that will change things. But I would hope at least that there's some changes in the way that you play rather than necessarily the technology. And we at CCP, we've sometimes had like a vision statement called that says that we want to create worlds that are more meaningful than real life. And it's like intentionally a little edgy. Like people ask us, what do you mean by that? How can something be more meaningful than real life? But I think it's kind of this impossibility of reaching towards it that is important for us, is that we really want to create meaningful worlds where you feel as a player that you're not wasting your time, your real life time, but you're actually doing something meaningful and important and having meaningful relationships with other people. And as such, it becomes like an essential part of your normal life, just as you go out to bars to socialize with other people. You go into this world and they give you something that is valuable. And I think it's important to try to reach for that, because that's how you maintain both like longevity in these kind of games, and also like maybe let people come to terms with this culture of gaming, which is like an important culture.
I think what is that, 11 years is a bit long to really make any prediction. But the interface is the piece that hasn't changed in 50 years, or 30 years. Keyboard and mouse, right? Like, we make advances in graphics and we do all this stuff, but the thing that right now is sort of at the point where you look at it and you go, why are we still pushing those buttons and clicking that mouse? The interface is what's going to change. I think Oculus is the first part we're seeing of that, where the next piece is how do you sort of communicate what you're doing in the game? That's probably going to be something we can't imagine right now, whether it's neural or, something like that. But I think that's the future. So.
All right, let's go ahead and get the line started for audience questions. In the meantime, I have kind of a pop quiz question, gentlemen. It's a theme that came up a little bit in some of the answers. So you mentioned that these days one of the big challenges for games is standing out in this sea of entertainment options that people have. Many other games, many other options. Do you think it was harder to get a game off the ground, 10 years ago when there was less options perhaps, but maybe the VCs didn't know as much about gaming, weren't as comfortable with the genre, or do you think it's easier now? Like, would you rather be launching a game now or 10 years ago from a competition standpoint?
I would say launching a game now is probably easier, like things like Unreal 4 just came online for people to kind of prototype and check out. There's communities that will allow you to kind of develop stuff pretty easily. So I think that creating the game is much easier now than it was 10 years ago. There's a lot more communities based around that stuff, so that's easier. There might be stuff with funding. I mean, when you have huge successes like League of Legends and World of Warcraft and things like that, it's probably easier to pitch to investors and be like, we're going to make that, and it's probably easier to pick up. But so personally speaking, I'd rather make a game presently, just because there's so many advances in things and where we're at. It's just me.
Yeah, I'd say I don't think there's ever been an easier time to, maybe since the very earliest days, to make a game. I think with the technology that you were saying, with the technology that's available now and the methods of getting the game out in front of the audience, I think it's pretty easy to, it's really, really easy.
Lots of air quotes there.
It's a lot simpler to get a game put together and on the market today. Now you still have to make a good game. You still have to be seen. There's a ton of games out there for you to kind of have to rise above and get noticed beyond. But yeah, we live in kind of a unique time for gaming right now.
That's true. I've been making games producing and directing games for about 25 years now. And back in the old days, like the 286, 386 days, you didn't have to really do much to put a game together. But on the other hand, you weren't making the same kind of games that you're making today at all. The expectations for games are extremely high nowadays. So when you start to make off something that's AAA, boy, you're biting off a big chunk. That's one of the reasons why indies are so popular right now. They can get away with making less because they're focusing on the fun and doing something that's unique and innovative. If you want to have a good time making a game nowadays, you should be trying to make something that hasn't been made before, because the expectations are not there for what you're making. And then you can actually have a lot of fun making it, and it is a really good time to be making games because the graphics are incredible, the infrastructure is there, the net's great, all that stuff. But if you're trying to make something that other people have made, I would say that it's actually a lot harder now than it used to be because the expectations are so incredibly high.
Yeah, I tend to agree that MMOs, I don't think will never be easy to make, and I think they're probably one of the most difficult genre to make and to actually also keep alive, which is the doom of most of these games. But from a indie developer point of view, creating games now is very, very easy. So that's nice.
We don't make games, but I mean, I look at the market and its expansion, and it's awesome. So today, make them today, make more of them.
All right. First audience question.
Hey, how's it going? I just want to say first, I used to be an addict of MMOs. I had to quit after a while. I'm just wondering about how much thought really goes into making sure, adjusting, okay, how much of this person's life is going to be required to get anywhere in this game, and as opposed to whether or not these people will ever have a social life outside of the game, that is.
Right. So personally, I think that what we try to do, like fun is the most important thing ultimately. And so that's kind of on you. If you're like, oh my God, this is so much fun, I can't stop it all, right? Awesome, as far as we're concerned. Hopefully not to the point of where it's detrimental, right? But that's how we kind of make things. We want to, every system that we have, we kind of work towards what's fun and you know, as you're progressing, you're supposed to feel like a badass, you know? So that is sort of how you're going along, and hopefully you feel like a badass your whole way, and you're not like, I have to sink 800,000 hours into this to do anything useful, you know? So we don't want to do that, right?
Anybody else?
No, either way. Yeah, I mean, it's basically, a lot of times as a game designer, you're working really hard to try to get, to make sure that people are having fun in 20 minutes. And then how many of those 20 minutes you want to consume it, and that's entirely up to you. It's your life. So all we can do is like remind you once in a while that your butt's been in the chair too long. We do something like that, but in general, yeah, how much you play is up to you. We just try to make sure that you have chewable chunks. Make sense?
Hi guys, this question is for everyone, but mostly for Dave. So I've been playing video games since before I could read, and one of the things that I've noticed that is gone from games these days is sort of that sense of wonder. You always know what's going to happen now. Before the NDA is even lifted, there's guides for everything. There's strategy guides, there's maps. I mean, I can remember graphing on graph paper the maps to Metroid, and I remember the first time I ran across the world of EverQuest in March 1999. I still remember that to this day, because no one knew what to do. So I'm just wondering if there's any way to get that back, and if so, how?
Such a softball for me. I mean, that's the whole point of EverQuest Next and Landmark. It's constantly changing. It's evolving in different directions all the time. So that's exactly what we got tired of making, was these static theme park worlds. And that's not a diss on anything that's out there, because there's a lot of fantastic games that have followed that model. But we already have a bunch of those. If we were going to make a new game, we wanted to do something that was different. And so that dynamic sense of wonder is exactly what we're pushing at with these kinds of games, and that's exactly what we're kind of hoping for from Landmark, because players will be building all this amazing content, setting up PvP environments and doing their own scenarios and dungeons and building stuff and all that other stuff. So as just a player, even if you never do any of that, you're always getting that sense of wonder wandering through the worlds. Yeah, I totally think that that's something that's critical for these games. WildStar has lots of really cool stuff in it that give you that kind of, those moments of joy as you move through the world. All of us understand that that's necessary. We just need to do it more often.
So first off, I'm going to start off by saying that I actually bought Landmark from you guys, so thanks for that. My question is, I know that a lot of companies nowadays are playing with Oculus, and they're playing with Track IR and stuff like that. Do you see that actually building in with SOE emote? And also for the other folks on the panel, do you guys have any options as far as you're aware in regards to using virtual reality technologies that are coming out at this point?
Well, I grew up reading Neil Stephenson and William Gibson, and now recently Ready Player One and all that stuff. I believe that's the future, and if it's not the future, I'm going to damn well make it anyway. And so the VR and AR and all that stuff I think is fantastic, and yeah, we're going to get to it. We've got a lot of stuff to build first, but it's on the list.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry,
VR?
repeat that question again.
Yeah, I mean, CCP, we're certainly betting on VR with Valkyrie, and I think it's a very exciting field, and it's very suitable for that kind of gameplay that we're aiming there. So I certainly high hopes for it.
I mean, we've kind of toyed around with it. Right now, we're just focused on getting the game out the door, making sure that that's good, you know, using the old mouse keyboard thing. But we've looked into it and we've tried it out, but it's not a focus for us right now.
We have dev kits in the office, and we've looked at some of that stuff. The guy that the lead programmer on our project is a huge VR fan, so I'm pretty sure that whether I like it or not, there's going to be something.
That's awesome.
So I've played and do play a lot of MMOs, and one of the reoccurring issues I've noticed in a lot of them is there's two phases of the game. You have leveling and end game, and they're usually not at all related. Like your experience in one is not at all what you have in the end, which creates three problems. You have people who just try to get through the leveling as fast as possible, ignore all of that, just to get to the end game. You have people who pick a class, would really love how that class plays at end game, but can't get there because the leveling is just too like, ugh. And then you have people who love a class all through leveling, get to end game and like, I can't do crap. So my question is yes. My question is, moving forward in MMOs, do you think that the leveling will stop being a thing? Will we see games where you just get in and you start playing and that's what you have for the whole time? Or like, is there really value in the leveling experience and how do you create that value?
So we had a panel yesterday that was all on Elder Game stuff, or that's what we call it, same thing as Endgame really. But we had that. I think that leveling is actually helpful. I mean, you've seen games like Guild Wars, they do that a lot, right? Where they just kind of go like, okay, we'll give you your cap at 30, and then there's a lot of content that you can kind of do, right? But I think that leveling teaches the player a lot of interesting things, and the goal or the thing that the designer needs to do is make sure that that leveling process is not painful. It is like, okay, this is fun. Like what I'm doing right now is cool. I'm learning about my class. I'm learning about these things. And when you have stuff at the end, I mean, this is another thing, and hopefully I don't offend anybody here when I say this. Nobody on this panel, but if you look at MMOs recently that have come out, what ends up happening is you have this kind of arc and then going down in subscriptions, right? You go, okay, we launch 2 million people playing, and then they get to the end and they're like, there's nothing to do, and then they leave, right? So you have to have something to do for everybody that's in your game, that's, whether it's housing, dungeons, PvP, etc. You have to have all that stuff, because otherwise they're just going to leave. So I think it's very important to do. And I'll shut up now and let them go. Sorry.
I think everybody here has talked about something that redefines what in-game content is. If it's just going and doing top-level dungeons or whatever that is, then you're creating a thin layer of content. But as the systems get there to create more player-generated content or more player interaction and really build community, in-game sort of changes to really what you're doing for the rest of that time. And there's game components, but there's also community components and things you can see and things you can build and create. And I think we're seeing a lot of discussion here about how you fix that problem that isn't related to changing what like the end game is. It's but bulking it up. I don't know if I'm explaining myself right, but
it doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be two games. There just doesn't have to be. The objective when you're making an MMO should be to making it fun all the way through, all the time. That's just the way it should be. And so leveling is a fine mechanic, but unfortunately it tends to promote this race mentality in players, where they have to race to the end, and whoever gets there first wins, but then they lose because it's not the game that they wanted, or that there's people there that are like just complete uber gods, and it's impossible to compete with them, and so on and so forth. So that's an extreme challenge with if you stay with that same model. There are definitely other things that can be done, and there's definitely other ways to mix up the fun and stuff along the way. So no, I don't think that leveling is absolutely required. It's not a necessary thing for MMOs, but you definitely have to have an open mind about it.
I also think, like, for example, in Eve, we haven't really had leveling ever, but what we try to do is what we call difficulty mountains. Basically, it's like a mountain. You can like walk to it, and you can walk as far up as you trust yourself to do. But there's nothing that either forbids you to go all the way to the top if you somehow manage to do that, or go back and come back later when you have more experience in terms of how to deal with the situations. So that's another way to approach game design, is creating that kind of...
Eve's interesting in the sense also that the thing you do like day 2 playing Eve is still useful in some capacity 6 years later. So you can fly the entry-level ships, or just like the interceptors, the frigates, and those sorts of things. They have a role at later phases of the game. Mm-hmm. And you may have started doing that 3 days in. Now, the next thing you may do may be battleships and marauders and super carriers and all these other things. But something you did early on isn't just a lost skill. And there's other ways to build those into games. I mean, it's something, the only implementation. So.
All right, well, I think that's about all the time that we have. One more? All right, we get one more, and then we'll give away the swag, and then we'll be out of here.
This better be
it has to
amazing.
No pressure. Good question, good question. You have the golden microphone.
What's your favorite color?
So I had a question about when you make a new game, where you expect your players to be coming from. If you're expecting players to migrate from other MMOs, or if you're expecting players to come from RPGs or something, because I've noticed a lot of MMO players tend to pick one and sort of stick with it, partially because that's where like their social group is, and it's a little disorienting to move from one to another sometimes. And I was curious where you are expecting your players to come from.
All over the place, basically. I mean, you have to, because it's such a massive game with so many different things, you have to have all that stuff. So there's people that have never played an MMO before that may be interested in it. So we have to kind of build some stuff for them to kind of get in. But at the same time, we are making an MMO through and through. So if you're like, I don't like MMOs, then you probably won't like our game. So, I mean, that's okay, you know? Like, you don't have to play it. It's fine. Go play other games. Yeah.
It does seem like there's a lot of crossover, though. I know in the guild that I play, most of the games that I play with, there's pretty much no game you can mention there that there isn't someone that's gone there and played. And the mass migrations between different MMOs when a new popular one comes out, those kind of happen. But I don't know. It depends on the type of people that you're playing with in the game that you're making.
Yeah, it's very true. We used to say all the time, you know, like we used to be able to say our demographic is, you know, male 18 to 35, so on and so forth. But MMOs, well, first of all, we all got older. And so our demographics spread out as gamers got older and new ones came in. The age demographic spread out. And then MMOs by their nature are international beasts. Because, okay, this is just one of my little soapboxes. One of the things that I really like about MMOs is that when you're interacting with somebody online, you have absolutely no idea where they live, what their race is, what their religion is, none of that stuff, well, unless they tell you. But in general, you're basically judging people on their actions rather than on what they look like or where they're from. And that's a very cool thing, and it breaks down a lot of stuff. So the demographics are extremely open. And now at the point when somebody asks me what our demo is, I just say we don't have one. It's everybody.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and it's we're also seeing like how the age is starting to change things. I mean, now there's a much wider generation gap of people playing games, and at the same time, obviously, there are new people coming to age to getting to the point where they can start playing games. So there's a steady stream of people coming in. And there is substantially more proportion of people also playing games, so I don't see any lack of people.
All right, they're flashing the magic sign at me, so that means we've got to wrap things up. Look under your seat. If you have a purple sticky note, come see me right outside in the hallway, and you will get your El Gato. And if you don't have one under your seat and your neighbor's already left, they might have just lost one. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. Guys.